It's begun. Have you ever wondered which Asian countries are on the brink of collapse? It may sound shocking, but these nations are facing problems so serious that they could be on the brink of disaster. Asia, a continent known for its booming economies and global influence, is now facing some of its toughest challenges yet as we approach 2025. While countries like China and India continue to dominate world markets, they too are grappling with slowing growth, mounting debt, and rising social tensions. But why is this happening? What's causing these challenges? And what would happen if these countries really do collapse? The truth is, the future for these nations is uncertain, and it could have a ripple effect on the entire world. In this video, we'll explore the 10 Asian countries that will collapse in 2025. You won't believe how some of these are heading toward disaster. Let's dive into the details. Number 10. China. China, the world's second largest economy, is facing serious challenges that threaten its global standing. Once known for rapid growth, its expansion has slowed significantly in recent years, with GDP growth dropping from over 10% annually to just 4 to 5%. The real estate sector, once a key economic driver, is now in crisis, with over $300 billion in real estate debt at risk. This threatens the broader financial system as the sector accounts for nearly 30% of GDP when factoring in related industries. China's debt burden has surged to over 280% of GDP, raising concerns about fiscal stability. The country also grapples with demographic challenges due to the long-standing one-child policy. By 2030, over 300 million people in China will be aged 60 or older, placing immense pressure on healthcare and social services. On the global stage, China's rise has sparked geopolitical tensions, particularly with the US and Western nations. Trade disputes, technology sharing restrictions, and supply chain decoupling are disrupting China's export-driven growth model. How China addresses these challenges will determine its future economic trajectory. Number 9. Pakistan. Pakistan is facing a deepening crisis marked by soaring inflation, a rapidly devaluing currency, energy shortages, and political instability. Once considered an emerging market, the country now struggles with systemic challenges threatening its economic stability and long-term growth. Inflation has surged to 27%, eroding purchasing power, while the Pakistani rupee has lost over 50% of its value in the past 5 years due to mounting external debt. This reliance on IMF bailouts has led to tough austerity measures, further destabilizing the economy. The energy sector is in turmoil, with severe shortages disrupting daily life and business operations. Political instability, marked by frequent changes in government, has hindered consistent economic policymaking. Climate change adds another layer of vulnerability, with the country facing increasing floods, droughts, and heat waves. Pakistan's security situation, including terrorism and internal conflicts, complicates its development and deters foreign investment. Despite these challenges, the country continues to turn to the IMF for financial assistance. But the harsh conditions attached to these loans further strain Pakistan's economy. With foreign reserves dwindling, the country's ability to stabilize its currency and economy remains uncertain. Number 8. Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, once a thriving island economy, is now grappling with severe financial and social instability. The country faces critical shortages of food, fuel, and essential goods, while public debt has soared to over 120% of GDP, one of the highest globally. This debt stems from years of borrowing for infrastructure projects and welfare programs without sufficient economic growth to generate necessary revenue. Inflation surged to over 50% in 2023, driven by both internal and external factors, further straining the economy. Foreign reserves are dangerously low, making it difficult for Sri Lanka to meet international obligations, contributing to the ongoing crisis. Political instability has intensified the situation, with widespread protests and calls for accountability from the public. Leadership challenges have destabilized the government and deepened the economic turmoil. Additionally, Sri Lanka faces significant environmental issues, especially deforestation, which threatens the country's biodiversity, agriculture, and overall ecological health. The combination of economic, political, and environmental challenges leaves Sri Lanka at a critical juncture, struggling to recover and stabilize its systems. Number 7. Myanmar. Myanmar is facing one of the most complex crises in its history following the 2021 military coup, which led to widespread political and economic instability. This takeover triggered violent protests, armed conflicts, and a severe humanitarian crisis. The military's actions led to mass casualties, with thousands killed and many imprisoned. International sanctions were imposed, deepening the economic turmoil and isolating the country globally. The coup resulted in a collapsing economy, exacerbated by sanctions, a devalued currency, and rising inflation. The Kayat's dramatic collapse has made everyday goods unaffordable, and key sectors like agriculture and tourism have seen significant declines. The country's economy faces severe disruptions due to loss of foreign investment and trade. Armed conflicts between the military and insurgents have displaced over 1.5 million people, creating a humanitarian crisis with overcrowded camps lacking basic services. Both the military and insurgents have committed human rights violations, including targeting civilians. This violence has led to widespread fear and suffering. The crisis has also destabilized neighboring countries, with over 1 million refugees fleeing to Thailand, Bangladesh, and India, further straining regional stability. Myanmar's ongoing conflict, economic collapse, and humanitarian challenges show no signs of easing, leaving millions in dire conditions. Number 6. North Korea. North Korea remains one of the most isolated and repressive countries, grappling with severe economic, political, and humanitarian crises. A major challenge is the ongoing food shortage, worsened by natural disasters, poor agricultural practices, and strict international sanctions. These sanctions, imposed by the United Nations, restrict access to essential imports like fertilizers and fuel, crippling agricultural production and contributing to widespread malnutrition and hunger. A significant portion of North Korea's resources is diverted toward military spending, including its nuclear weapons and missile programs. An estimated 25% of its GDP is allocated to military expenditures, leaving little for vital services such as healthcare, education, and infrastructure. This military focus further weakens the country's already fragile economy. North Korea's defiance of international norms, especially regarding its nuclear ambitions, has led to deeper diplomatic isolation. Ongoing sanctions from the UN and neighboring countries have exacerbated the economic crisis and severely limited access to foreign aid. Despite occasional diplomatic outreach, the country's isolation continues, preventing much-needed humanitarian assistance from reaching its population. In summary, North Korea's focus on military power, economic isolation, and inability to address basic needs leave its population struggling and vulnerable to further hardship. Number 5. Afghanistan. Since the Taliban regained control of Afghanistan in August 2021, the country has faced severe economic decline, exacerbated by sanctions, aid suspension, and a collapsed banking system. The US and EU imposed sanctions, freezing billions of dollars in foreign reserves and halting foreign aid, which had previously supported much of Afghanistan's economy. This led to economic isolation and a severe humanitarian crisis, with millions facing hunger and poverty. The Taliban's lack of international recognition has further isolated the country, preventing trade and foreign investments. The banking system's collapse has led to limited withdrawals, soaring inflation, and a lack of access to financial services, worsening daily life. Food insecurity is rampant, with nearly 20 million people facing hunger due to high food prices and a failing agricultural sector. The Taliban's restrictions on women's rights, including bans on education and employment, have further stunted economic growth and social development. Additionally, the opium trade remains a significant part of Afghanistan's economy, contributing to corruption and undermining legitimate economic activities. Afghanistan's recovery hinges on international engagement, but the Taliban's governance and human rights issues complicate efforts to address the crisis. Number 4. Lebanon. Lebanon is grappling with an unprecedented economic crisis that has pushed the nation to the brink of collapse. The Lebanese pound has lost over 90% of its value against the US dollar, fueling hyperinflation and devastating the purchasing power of citizens. Everyday essentials like food, medicine, and fuel have skyrocketed in price, creating immense strain on households. The economic downturn has also been marked by widespread poverty, with over 80% of the population now living below the poverty line, and the middle class all but disappearing. This economic collapse has been compounded by severe infrastructure failures, including power outages lasting for hours, water shortages, and the breakdown of public services such as healthcare and waste management. The crisis has been exacerbated by political gridlock and corruption at all levels of government. Lebanon's political system, divided along sectarian lines, has created inefficiency and disarray, preventing meaningful reforms. Meanwhile, the banking sector has collapsed, freezing the savings of millions and deepening the financial crisis. With youth unemployment exceeding 80%, many young Lebanese are leaving the country in search of better opportunities, accelerating the brain drain. As political instability, economic decline, and social unrest deepen, Lebanon's social fabric is increasingly fraying, and the path to recovery remains uncertain. Number 3. Bangladesh. Bangladesh has seen impressive economic growth, becoming one of South Asia's fastest-growing economies. However, this progress is accompanied by significant vulnerabilities. The country's growing national debt, largely fueled by foreign loans for infrastructure projects, raises concerns about future fiscal stability. As debt obligations increase, it could strain budgets and undermine economic gains. Bangladesh is also highly vulnerable to climate change. Rising sea levels and frequent extreme weather events, such as floods and cyclones, threaten agriculture and critical infrastructure, impacting food security and economic productivity. The garment industry, which accounts for over 80% of exports, faces challenges from global market shifts, rising production costs, and sustainability demands, potentially reducing Bangladesh's competitiveness. Political instability, marked by corruption and social unrest, further threatens the nation's economic stability. This volatility erodes investor confidence and could trigger an economic downturn. Overpopulation in urban centers like Dhaka and Chittagong places pressure on infrastructure, exacerbating social issues and reducing quality of life. Additionally, significant disparities between urban and rural areas hinder human capital development, perpetuating poverty and inequality. To sustain its growth, Bangladesh must address these vulnerabilities through effective debt management, climate resilience measures, political stability, improved urban planning, and greater regional equality. Number 2. Laos. Laos is grappling with significant economic challenges that threaten its long-term stability and growth. The country's debt has surpassed 90% of GDP by 2023, largely due to loans from China for large infrastructure projects. While these projects have driven some growth, the increasing debt burden raises concerns about sustainability, especially if global interest rates rise or economic conditions worsen. Additionally, Laos is highly dependent on hydropower for revenue and electricity, but climate change-induced droughts and fluctuating global energy prices threaten this sector's stability. The economy is also plagued by rising inflation and a depreciating currency, which erode purchasing power and increase import costs. Slow infrastructure development further hampers the country's competitiveness and limits foreign investment. Corruption within both public and private sectors undermines investor confidence, while technological stagnation and insufficient investment in education stifle innovation and economic diversification. As a result, Laos remains overly reliant on a narrow set of industries, limiting its global competitiveness. To ensure long-term prosperity, Laos must address these challenges through significant reforms. Reducing its debt burden, diversifying its economy, improving infrastructure, and tackling corruption are key steps toward achieving economic stability and sustainable growth. Without such measures, the country's economic future remains uncertain. Number 1. Maldives. The Maldives, renowned for its idyllic beaches and vibrant tourism industry, faces existential threats that endanger its future. The most pressing concern is rising sea levels, which pose a severe risk to the low-lying island nation. Coastal erosion is already damaging islands and key infrastructure, threatening the country's tourism and fishing industries. If sea levels continue to rise, large parts of the Maldives could become uninhabitable, displacing its population and devastating the economy. Economically, the Maldives is highly dependent on imports, particularly food and fuel, making it vulnerable to global market fluctuations. Combined with public debt exceeding 100% of GDP, the country faces significant financial instability. The lack of domestic production and limited resources for infrastructure investment further exacerbate this vulnerability, leaving the nation susceptible to economic shocks. Social inequality is another critical issue, with rising living costs in urban centers like Malé widening the wealth gap. Many citizens in rural areas struggle to access basic resources, limiting their ability to adapt to economic challenges. This inequality weakens the nation's resilience, hindering efforts for sustainable development. Without international support and effective climate adaptation strategies, the Maldives risks economic collapse and territorial loss by 2025. Urgent global cooperation and adaptation measures are crucial for the nation's survival. And there you have it, the 10 Asian countries that are on the brink of collapse. From political unrest to economic crises, these nations are facing challenges that could change their futures forever. It's a reminder of how quickly things can shift on a global scale and how interconnected we all are. But here's the big question. Do you think these countries can recover, or are they too far gone? What do you believe will happen next? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your opinion matters. If you found this video eye-opening, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on more world-changing topics. Thanks for watching.